Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Top 10 players for this Texas Longhorns program heading into 2024. And Dill, we've been extremely vocal that this is one of, if not the best team in college football heading into 2024. A lot of different directions you could really go with this list. And let's just put the disclaimer out now. This is your list. If you guys have some problems with it, I know I certainly do. Light them up in the comments section. Really excited to get into it. And before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Texas Longhorn fans. It's been a blast talking this program on the recruiting trail, in the transfer portal. It's no secret the fellas are awfully high on this team heading into 2024. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, give it to my brother in the comments section. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this list. Now, I took your top 10 list. We're going to get into that, but I kind of wanted to give a shout out to a couple of guys that maybe aren't in your top 10 list that I certainly think might belong in that top 10 list, or quite frankly, could emerge as top 10 players. Let's start with true freshman Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons. You look at Ryan Wingo and say, I don't know how much opportunity that he's going to get in this wide receiver room, just of the nature that this wide receiver room is absolutely loaded. But Ryan Wingo looked phenomenal in that spring game. Colin Simmons, that's a guy that I think could play a lot. I think he's physically ready to play. He has a little bit of a different level of juice coming off that edge. And we talked about it. We want to see more production from these edge rushers for Texas. Those are the two true freshmen. Ethan Burke, that was a guy that you texted me. You felt a little sick not putting him in your top 10 list. I'll let you talk a little bit about Ethan Burke real quick.
I mean, the more you watch him, ultra high motor. I mean, I'm watching that Washington game. He's chasing screens down. He's doing so much, but also just that length, that athleticism, that ability to be really disruptive. And you'd like to see him maybe be a bit more refined as a pass rusher and be able to disengage a little bit more and maybe rack up a few more sacks. But just a really physical, disruptive defensive end. That length is just an inherent problem for everyone he goes against. And when you play that hard and have that much skill or have that much talent traits, you can be really good.
Ethan Burke started to put it together in that 2023 season. And you said it, he has all the length in the world, probably needs to learn how to use it a little bit more. But as he started to learn how to use it, he certainly looked like one of the best pass rushers for this program. Certainly could be a top 10 guy. I want to give a quick shout out to Barron Sorrell. Never gets enough love, and I think that's the nature of having guys like T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy on that defensive line. He's been nails for Texas over the last couple of years. I'm a big fan of him. Might not be a top 10 guy, but is a very reliable and a difference maker up front for Texas. And then talk about a breakout player, Jahdae Cook. This dude, we've loved him since the high school ranks. He just has a little bit of a different feel when he has the football in his hands, when he's trying to create separation. I'm fired up for Jahdae Cook as well. And Dill, let's get in this top 10 list. And a guy that I feel, I love that you put him in the top 10 list because I feel like we don't talk enough about him. Jahdae Barron playing that nickel role. Absolutely nails for Texas coming back for 2024. Definitely a top 10 player in my mind.
And a guy who just, you can't argue with the production. I mean, he's been really, really good for a couple of years now, especially last year, just in the right spot, gets his hands on footballs, does a lot of things. And from that nickel spot, which is becoming so important for college football, I think he does add a lot to Texas. I don't know that he has that upside that guys like Malik Muhammad or even DJ Williams have in that secondary, who, I mean, those guys, when you see, they have a different level of talent, a little bit more explosive, a little bit more athletic. But yeah, Jahdae Barron, just an experienced, savvy, really, really sound football player.
Two things I want to add about Jahdae Barron. One, you noted it. I don't know why nickel defenders don't get enough love. It is because you said it best. It's becoming such an important position at the college football level. You need your nickel defenders to come and tackle in the run game. Jahdae Barron, third on the team in tackles for this Texas Longhorns program, certainly can kind of operate in the box, give you that run support. Really good in coverage, but experienced. And we kind of talked about this. It was huge to bring in a guy like Andrew Bakuba, who we're going to be talking about in just a little bit. I mean, this is a young Texas secondary. Having a guy like Jahdae Barron who's played over 1,600 snaps, that's absolutely massive for this Texas program. Going to number 9 and a guy that I, again, have absolutely loved. You guys getting a sense of why I like this Texas team because I've loved what they've done on the recruiting trail the last couple of years. True freshman CJ Baxter last year, he did not look like a true freshman. And I think the thing that I want to emphasize with CJ Baxter is when Jonathan Brooks went down and CJ Baxter took on a little bit more responsibility and volume, I thought that's kind of where he was at his best. This is a guy that you want to give 20 plus carries to in a game because he is going to grind down opposing defenses. One of those running backs that you simply don't want to tackle 20 plus times a game. I think CJ Baxter going into year 2 is a guy that certainly can go for over 1,000 yards in this offense.
Really, really good contact balance for a freshman. I feel like the past couple of guys we've seen, it's like, man, can they run a little bit harder, be able to run through tackles a little bit more? He can grind out those yards for sure. Obviously, has the athleticism. When you come in as the type of recruit he comes in, you kind of know he has that. But again, the sound ability to run the football, grind out yards, which is big when you have an offensive line like Texas and want to run the way they run. I think he's huge. I will say, shout out to the Texas fans. I did spend a little time watching Jaden Blue when I was going back getting ready for this. Yeah, he's going to be really good. I remember in the Michigan-Texas roster battle breakdown, they said, oh, you just wait, you just wait. I think he does add a little bit of a new element into this offense, a little bit more shifty, a little bit better out of the backfield and in space. I mean, that is going to be a really, really good 1-2 punch, kind of like that Roshan Johnson.
Bijan, yeah, I agree with you. And also, you're right. They balance each other out so exceptionally well. A guy like Jaden Blue is Coach Sark's dream, like a guy that you can get involved in so many different ways in an offense. Going to number 8, Andrew Makuba. And again, I thought this was one of, if not the most impactful addition Texas made in the transfer portal. And that's saying a lot because we're going to talk about a few more guys that have been brought in through the transfer portal that are going to be top 10 players for this Texas team. But similar how we talked about with Barron, just a raw experience. I mean, Andrew Makuba is a guy that struggled with injuries in 2023, but had you kind of seen him healthy and play the way he played his first 2 years at Clemson, probably would be playing on Sundays during the 2024 season. Texas gets a massive benefit of Andrew Makuba coming back for year 4. What I love about Andrew Makuba is he can do so many different things, right? This is a guy that can play that free safety role, can come up and play that nickel corner. It's rare to have safeties that can hold up in man coverage like Andrew Makuba can. You see that 54% completion percentage when targeted. This is a guy that, I mean, not only is experienced, but you can get involved in this defense in a multitude of different ways.
And you know that if you've watched Clemson's defense, you know that they need to be able to play that man coverage from any spot in the secondary. You know they like to play that kind of cover one with the robber look and that safety. So again, kind of what you said, just having the ability to play a lot of different ways. I thought that was one thing. You saw some bad moments from Texas safeties in terms of just being able to straight up cover a guy in moments when they had to. So I think he does add a lot of it. Like, just adds a kind of new set of skill set into that room where, again, you can put him in man coverage. And I think Texas desperately needs
this.
That.
Might be a good spot to add another my guy to the list, Derek Williams. That's another guy that's going to be a really, really good player for Texas in the back end. Going to number 7, a little bit low for my liking, but we'll ride with it. Anthony Hill Jr. I think this is going to be one of the premier linebackers in all of the country next year. But you talk about listing top 5 linebackers come the middle of October. I think Anthony Hill Jr. is going to be on that list nationally. Was second on the team with 67 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, 5 sacks. One of, if not the freakiest athletic linebackers that you see. Now, going back on the film prepping for this, they used Anthony Hill Jr. in a lot of different ways. He's a guy that can spy the quarterback, close distance exceptionally well when he's breaking in on quarterbacks, but also a guy that you want to just line him up as an edge rusher and challenge tackles from an athletic standpoint. 14 quarterback hurries, a 14% pass rush win rate. You don't often see linebackers that are difference makers. Anthony Hill Jr. is going to be a difference maker for the next 2 years.
And you definitely might be right. And that is the hard part when you're doing teams like a Texas.
Yeah. So
like, I don't know. You got like 20 guys who you think are going to be in the pros at some point in Texas right there. You might be right because Anthony Hill, you're kind of just watching how dominant he was early as a freshman and just how much he was able to impact games. And I think the key is impacting games at a very obvious level. I think he was the guy in that linebacker room who did that. And you like Jalen Ford for sure. He's a really, really good player, but you didn't feel his presence the same way you feel Anthony Hill, where you're getting sacks, you're getting TFLs, you're just making a ton of plays.
What happens when this kid just develops between the years, like develops some of those instincts in terms of seeing what's in front of him, playing a little bit faster mentally? I think you're going to take a massive step because that linebacker position It has a lot to do with experience and kind of developing those instincts. Once he gets a little bit more of that, you're looking at one of the better players in all of college football, criminally low coming in at number 7. Let's get into number 6, another transfer portal addition in Trey Moore. Anytime you're talking about a guy, and this also shows how loaded this Texas team is. This kid was 3rd in the country in sacks with 14, 7th in the country in 17.5 tackles for loss. This Texas team, you make no mistake about it, their defense, their identity is creating negative plays. You're bringing a guy like Trey Moore to further enhance that from that edge rusher spot. Dill, we talked about Texas. A lot of people assume their defensive line is going to take a step back. And although that might be true on the inside, but we're going to talk about some guys that certainly are going to be good on the inside. I think their edge rusher position, whether you talk about Colin Simmons coming in as a true freshman, Trey Moore coming in through the portal, or Ethan Burke just taking that step, I think this edge rusher position is going to be much better than what you saw in 2023 for Texas.
And I have to go with him as my number 1 guy in that edge rusher room just because the production. I mean, you can't argue with that. I don't care what level at Division I you're playing. When you're dominating the way he's dominating, very, very impressive. And I mean, it is tough because you like guys like Ethan Burke. You like guys like even Justice Finkley seems like he's coming around. Barron Stroll, obviously really good, but Trey Moore just producing at a different level. That's why
it's really hard to not put a guy that was top 10 in both sacks and tackles for loss as not your best edge rusher on this team. Going to another young cat that is probably a little bit more of a projection, and I think you're saying he's going to be a top 5 player for this Texas team, maybe not currently a top 10 player, but you get into year 2 of this kid, Malik Muhammad at the cornerback spot. I mean, he came on in a meaningful way late in the 2023 season. And Dill, you just see he checks every single box, right? He can play some press man if you want him to. He's extremely fluid in terms of mirroring wide receivers. 7 forced incompletions on 35 targets is an absolutely insane number. And you saw Texas have a lot of confidence in this kid down the stretch in 2023, started both the Big 12 championship game against Oklahoma State and the college football playoff game against Washington. Riser for the boys heading into 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the athletic potential that's in him. I mean, you kind of see how much range he plays with from that corner position when they're in zone coverage, can cover a lot of ground at one point, really, really explosive, can jump out of the gym. He just is like a guy who, when you put him out in space, he just eats up a lot of it in that secondary room. I thought that was something Texas, frankly, struggled with at times, especially early in the season. But I just want, like, his athleticism is just on such a different level. I feel like I think he's having a huge year.
All right, let's talk another one of your guys, so to speak. That's wide receiver Isaiah Bond, one of the more coveted, if not the most coveted wide receiver in the transfer portal, coming over from Alabama. I'll give you the floor here. I know this is your guy. What's he bring to Texas? Why is he top 5 player?
I mean, this is a guy, I think if you've been kind of watching Alabama since he was a freshman, when you see him catch the ball, when you see him run routes, he's just a little bit more explosive, it feels like, than everyone else. Really can get downfield, can run routes really effectively, great with the ball in his hands. I think he's a guy who should be minimum 1,200-yard guy on a really, really good offense. I don't think he's really got to experience a great offense at Alabama, especially not through the air, because even Bryce Young's last year in college, they weren't the same as you kind of saw earlier in Bryce Young's career. I think in a Texas offense that does a bit better job getting guys open, getting guys involved in that wide out spot, I think he's going to have 1,300 yards, easy.
So the thing with me and Isaiah Bond, and I was kind of like doing some reading on this kid, 50% completion percentage when targeted 20-plus yards down the field. That is an exceptional number. You talk about a true vertical threat in this Texas offense, you're looking at it with Isaiah Bond. But what I'm most excited about with Isaiah Bond is more opportunity to operate after the catch. That was something that you didn't totally get the full experience with Isaiah Bond at Alabama. He comes to Texas. Coach Sark is a mastermind at scheming his guys opportunities to operate after the catch. I think that is where you see the most growth from Isaiah Bond heading into 2024. I love this fit for Texas heading into 2024, getting into our top 3. Let's talk about a big dog that just flies under the radar. That's Alfred Collins, right? Everybody wanted to talk about Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, 2 absolute dogs. We're certainly not arguing that, but a guy that just flew under the radar for this Texas defensive line was Alfred Collins. And it doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet, right? 22 tackles, 2 TFLs, only 2 sacks, but 18 quarterback hurries, a 13% pass rush win rate from the inside. He can eat up double teams, do some of that dirty work. I love this. I thought you were going to be a little lower on Alfred Collins. I think he's just right as a top 3 player for this Texas team heading into 2024.
No, man, I think both of us are about as high as you can be on Alfred Collins. I think, again, what kind of separates him is, yes, he has the ability to eat up blocks, let their linebackers play a little bit clean, but he also can make a lot of plays. I just think, again, he was obviously behind a couple of really, really good players. I think he has the athleticism you want, has the size you want, does a really good job getting off the blocks. He's just a very dominant defensive tackle for me this year in college football.
And that's super rare. When you talk about interior guys who can do the dirty work at a high level, eat up double teams, let your linebackers come downhill, but also be difference makers. And when it's time to pin your ears back and get after the quarterback, generate some pass rush juice from the inside. Alfred Collins does both at an extremely high level. I love this take at number 3 for Texas. Going up to number 2, quarterback Quinn Ewers. And I think just the development that you saw, the jump you saw him have from 2022 to 2023, a 69% completion percentage, well up from his 2022 numbers. The thing that stood out to me, and I think a opportunity for him to continue to develop, is what he can do working down the field. I mean, you saw Texas ask him to push the ball down the field, 8.4 yards average depth of target, a 34% completion percentage, 20-plus yards down the field. That's not an extraordinary number, but you did see him take a jump in terms of working down the field, pushing it 20-plus yards down the field. If he takes another jump heading into 2024, you're looking at a Heisman caliber quarterback here in Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, and I think part of that is you did see such a massive improvement in the 2023 year. I also think you're starting to see a little bit more playmaking ability, which I think is huge, because when you're going to be a really, really good quarterback, sometimes you need to do that. I thought he had a couple of those plays in Washington, whether that's tucking it down, being able to keep his eyes up when he's on the move, throw accurate footballs. I thought those type of things you really started to see, along with just, again, the steady development he's made as a pure quarterback. But that athleticism is starting to show a little bit, that ability to make some plays, which, again, is so crucial in today's game. I think he started to show it. I mean, if he has another good year for them, he's obviously going to be a first-round pick, I think, in this year's NFL draft, but be one of the better college football quarterbacks.
I think that's such a good take with the athleticism, because that was a problem in 2022. Like, being able to extend plays, that's something that gone are the days of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning just kind of sitting like statues in the pocket. You look at all the elite quarterbacks, both at the college and NFL level, you have to have some sort of athleticism to extend plays and make stuff happen outside the pocket. And I'm not saying Quinn Ewers needs to be Lamar Jackson, but you got to be able to make it happen. You saw him do that in 2023, lost a little bit of weight, said he cut down on the Chick-fil-A. Now I'm fired up about Quinn Ewers heading into 2024, number 1 player on this Texas roster. No surprise. I do want to start with, I think you're sleeping on DJ Campbell. I probably would have had him as a top 10 player. He's a guy that maybe it's a projection. Like, you want to see him take that step in 2024. I personally think you're going to see that step. Let's talk about Kelvin Banks. One of, if not the best tackles in the country, 550 pass pro snaps, only gave up 1 sack, 10 quarterback hurries, has started every single game at the left tackle spot going back to his true freshman year. You were talking about just an absolute nails offensive tackle in an era of college football where every single program is desperate for starting caliber tackles. Texas has one of, if not the best left tackle in the country in Kelvin Banks.
It's still like a young player at the end of the day. And as he continues to get more athletic, I thought he made a jump from his freshman year to his sophomore year. I think he can continue to build on that. Obviously a really, really big football player. So that is like a good thing in a sense, but you want to continue to build that athleticism. I think you saw the jumps last year. You make another jump this year. You're looking at a bona fide top 10 offensive tackle in next year's draft. And just, again, when you're that consistent, you just play every game, you start every game, you play a really high level every game going back to your freshman year. I mean, he is the best player on this team in my mind. Just a quick caveat on my take on this Texas offensive line. I think I want to see some of those other guys become a little more dominant. I think there's a sense that it's a really, really great unit. So I think everybody maybe looks a little bit better. I think there is room for individual guys to play a little bit better on that offensive line. You obviously mentioned DJ Campbell, Hayden, some of those guys. I think they can play at a higher level personally. At the end of the day, this is a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. I think this year they're going to be right in the contention. I think that certainly helps everybody. Kelvin Banks, to me, is the one guy who stands out as like truly, truly dominant play in and play out. I think there is room for the other guys to, again, take a step as individuals. And that's not saying they're bad players. Texas is a really good team, so it's hard to crack the top 10. I do think there is room for, again, as individuals to play a little bit more physically dominant at times.
I think that's fair. And I think you might see that. One of the things why I'm so high on this Texas team is, one, the line of scrimmage play is going to be really good, but particularly this offensive line. I mean, so many guys they're going into year 3 of playing together. And I think
they're young players. DJ Campbell's still a young player.
That can take that step not only individually, but as a unit. And that's something that not a lot of people talk about, but it's starting to become a little bit more important at the college football level, that continuity. Right, you rarely see offensive lines. You saw Michigan last year. I mean, that unit was together for 3 years. I think this Texas unit, a lot of these guys have played a lot of reps with each other for a long time. I think that continuity certainly going to help. Like the list, I actually didn't have as many problems with it as I thought I was going to. Texas fans, let us know the players that the boys are sleeping on in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking.
One other guy I think we might be sleeping on is Vasek. Golden Vasek at that edge spot. I kind of watched in the spring game. I'm like, well, this might just be another Ethan Burke. He's long, hard to deal with because of that length. I'm interested to see if he can get some burn. It'll be tough, but I was like, man, this guy has like kind of a very similar game to what Ethan Burke has.
I think that's the exciting part about Texas. So many guys that could take that step in 2024. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.